Good afternoon, everyone. In this tutorial, we're going to continue from where we left off in the last one and look at how we can use the data frames that we created and imported. So before we get to anything new, there is one more data frame that I forgot to mention last time that you have convenient access to. It is called mtcars. This is a built-in data set in our studio as some sample data for you to use and practice with. Rather than practicing on mtcars directly, what I would recommend doing is let's create a data frame. We'll call it dfcars, and we're going to create that as just a direct copy of mtcars. So now, rather than working with mtcars directly, do anything you want to practice with on dfcars. That way, let's say you change some data or you delete some rows or whatever it might be, you still have the original mtcars available. Okay, so this week we want to practice a lot of the different things we can do using our data frames. So we're going to talk about how to view them in all sorts of different ways. We're going to talk about how to summarize the data. We're going to look at how to remove rows, how to filter the data, how to sort the data, and how we can add new rows to our data frames. So lots of things to get to. For the most part, we're going to work with dfiris. We'll start off by just putting that into the console, and it'll print the whole data frame, just like we saw before. We can do the same thing with the print function. So I can print dfiris, and that's exactly the same. If we want to view it in the source pane, we can do that with the command view. It is capital V, it's case sensitive. Or if we want the same result here, we can click the little table icon over in the environment pane. So lots of ways to just look at your data frame. You might find that that's too much though, right? dfiris is pretty long. There's 150 rows, and that's a lot of scrolling. Maybe you just want a little slice of it so that you can sort of get an idea of what's going on in the table. You can do that with the function head. If you put that in by itself, it's going to give you the first 6 rows. If you want some different number, you can add that as a second argument. So let's do the first 10. On a very similar note, there is a function called tail that does the same thing, but it's the last X number of rows instead. So there's the last 8 rows. Another way you can kind of get a sense of what's going on with an object is you can use the function str, that stands for structure. If I want to see the structure of dfiris, we'll see that this is a data frame. It has 150 observations, so 150 rows of 6 variables, so 6 columns. Each of the names of the columns is here, and then we get a little bit more information about each one. So we can see that ID is an integer. The next 4 are all numeric fields. Species is CHR, that stands for character, so that is a text field. After that, it gives you some of the values in each. If we want more information, some summary statistics on all of the numeric fields, we can use the function summary. This is going to return us a lot of summary statistics that you might want for each of those fields. So we can see the minimum value, the maximum value, the average, and then the first quartile, median, and third quartile. For any non-numeric fields, it's just going to return us how many observations there are and what is the data type. So other than just looking at the first or last X number of fields, we can also use bracket notation to select any rows or columns that we want in particular. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let's say I want to see rows 10 through 20. So I put dfiris. In brackets, I would put 10:20. That specifies which rows I'm interested in. And then I put a comma, and then whatever columns I'm interested in. So if I only want columns 3 through 5, I would do 3:5. You do always need the comma If you are not doing anything to filter the rows, you would put nothing before it. If you're not doing anything to filter the columns, you would put nothing after it. So let's go ahead and do a quick example just to show that. So we'll do dfiris, and we'll only filter the rows. So we still put the comma, but we're putting nothing after it because we're not filtering the columns. So now we'll see all of the columns. We can also use negative values in this syntax to do the opposite. So we can see dfiris, but we can filter out certain things that we don't want to see. So let's say I want to remove, let's say rows 101 through 150. And I want to remove column 1. So there's dfiris, but I've removed the first column and every row after 100. This is the same process we use to actually remove rows or columns from the selection. So this showed us how to look at the selection, but we haven't actually changed it. If we want to change it, we have to use that same syntax as if we were creating a data frame, right? So I'm going to say dfiris, and let's just get rid of that first column. You'll notice up here in the view, the first column is just an ID field, but it's mostly extraneous information because when we imported this data set, we didn't provide row names, so our automatically assigned numbers as the row names, which are exactly the same as the ID. So we don't really need this ID field. So let's go ahead and save dfiris, but we're going to get rid of, we're not going to do anything with the rows, so nothing, comma, and we're just going to get rid of that first column, -1. So I'm overwriting the current dfiris with this filtered selection, which is dfiris minus that first column. And if you look in the view panel here, you see that first column is now gone. It's no longer a part of dfiris. This is one of the important parts of data munging, getting rid of things that we don't need or things that shouldn't be included. We can do the same thing to get rid of rows. And let's go ahead and look at doing that, but instead of using the minus syntax to say what we want to filter out, let's just keep the rows that we are interested in. So let's imagine for whatever reason, rows 141 through 150 are no good. So I'm going to save dfiris as a filtered selection from dfiris, only including rows 1 through 140, comma, and I'm doing nothing with the columns. So now we'll see dfiris only has 140 observations. We've gotten rid of everything that came after 140. So that's how we can get rid of columns we don't want to have as part of our data frame, and that's how we can get rid of rows that we don't want to have as part of our data frame. Let's go ahead and also get into how we can filter our data based on, rather than row and column numbers, let's talk about how we can filter it based on the data in the data frame. So let's pull a summary again of dfiris. You'll notice that first column is gone, and the numbers have probably changed a little bit because we got rid of the last 10 observations, right? So let's say we're only interested in seeing the large irises. Let's use petal length as a stand-in for that, and we'll say we only want irises that are above the 3rd quartile. So I want to filter. I don't want to save, well, you know what, let's save this as a new data frame. We'll create a filtered data frame that is just, say, df large iris. And we're going to create this as a filtered list from the original dfiris. And the way we're going to filter it is still using that bracket notation. But rather than just inputting a number for the rows that we're interested in, we're going to tell it what rows we're interested in based on the value in a certain column. So the way we refer to a column, we can say dfiris. We use the $sign to say that I'm referring to a particular column, and I'll say petal length is greater than 5. then put the comma, and I'm not doing anything with the columns. So we run that, and now we've created df large iris. So let's pull that. What you'll see we have here is now a filtered list. So notice a lot of the irises are gone. df large iris only has 33 rows. And we only have the ones with a petal length of more than 5 centimeters. So if you're just interested in the data on the large irises, this is how you could filter that. Okay, we talked about how to remove rows, we talked about how to filter our data. Let's go into how to add new rows or columns to your data. So let's jump over to a simpler data set. We'll use df.gym for this. I'll go ahead and view that as well so you can see it as we work on it. Okay, so if we want to add a new row to a data frame, we use the function rbind. That stands for row bind. We want to bind a new row to the data frame, right? So I'm going to say df.gym is now going to be rbind between df.gym. So I'm starting from the data frame itself, and then I put a comma, and then whatever the row is that I want to add to the data frame. So to give a row, that's going to be a combined several values combined into a list. Our first field needs to be a string. We will use an e name, so let's do Eli. And then we have 2 numeric fields. For jump, we'll put, let's say 22. And for 100-meter time, we'll put 11.8. I don't know if these are reasonable numbers. I'm just making them up. And what we see is df.gym now has an extra row that we've added. We added Eli with those stats. So that's how we can add a row to our data frame. We can also add columns. The difference is when we're adding a column, we need a column name, right? When we added a row, we didn't need that. It just got the incremented name. But if we want to add a column and we want to give it a name, we want to create it as a vector first. So let's go ahead and create a vector. We'll call it time for 200-meter dash. And we'll create our vector. We'll make it, I don't know, 28, 27, 26, 25, 24. I don't know. Like I said, I'm just making up the numbers. So that'll be our vector to store our 200-meter dash times. And then all I have to do, if I want to add a new column to df.gym, is a cbind. So now I'm binding a column to my data frame rather than a new row. And instead of inputting the values manually, it is between df.gym and t200m. So now we've added a new column to our selection with the numbers that we supplied. So now we can remove rows or columns from our selection. We can filter our selection based on some kind of criteria. We can add new rows or columns to our information. Let's also look at how to sort a selection. So let's go back to df.iris. Let's open it as well in the source pane so you can look. If you're just looking to view the data frame in a particular order, you can do that very easily in the view. You can just click the little arrow next to a column, and it'll sort that in ascending order. Click it again, it'll switch to descending order. Very easy. But if you want to actually save the data frame in a filtered order, we have a little bit more of a process to do. So we talked about how you can use a column in calculations, right? If I want, let's say, the average, so the mean of, let's do the sepal length. So we can use field values in functions like that, right? So the average sepal length is 5.8. But how do I know? Well, let's rather than mean, let's do max. Okay, so the maximum sepal length is 7.9 centimeters. But how do I know which row that came from? The mean doesn't come from a particular row, that's why we can't do it with mean. But if I want to know which row number that max value came from, I can use which dot, and then I can type that same function. So max df-iris sepal length. So that tells me that it's row 132 where we find the maximum sepal length. And when we sort it, yeah, that's what we see, right? Row 132 has the highest sepal length, that's 7.9. So when we're trying to sort a data frame, what we're really doing is we want the ordered list of the row numbers where we find the values in the correct order, right? So to do that, we can use the function order. So if I want to order df-iris by sepal length, that's how we do it. So that's returning me the row values in order. By default, it's going to be ascending order. If you want it in descending order, you can do the same thing, but with a minus. So there it is in descending order. If I want to save the data frame in this sorted order, all I need to do is save the index in that order. So let's go ahead and assign it. We'll create a vector, we'll call it index. Oh, well, let's grab that previous row, and we'll save that to a vector called index. So now we have a list of those row numbers in order based on their sepal length. So all I have to do to sort df-iris into that order is use bracket notation again. And I can sort it the rows by the index, comma, don't need anything else. So now we're viewing df-iris based on the sepal length. If I want to save it in that order, it's just the same as saving it as a filtered list. So I can do df-iris is now going to be df-iris sorted by index. And now if we pull df-iris, it's now a sorted list. So we looked at how to remove rows or columns. We looked at how to filter rows or columns based on the values in the data frame. We looked at how to sort, and we looked at how to look at some of the details about the object or a summary of the numeric fields. The last thing I want to touch on is how we look at the column names and how we can fix those if we're not happy with them. So we can use the function colnames, and that'll return us the column names of the data frame. If we want to change that, we can pass it into a vector just like we did with the indexes. So let's create a vector temporarily, we'll just call it temp, and it will be the colnames of df-iris. So now we have those column names in a vector. If I want to look at the first value in that list, it's bracket notation. And if I want to change the value in there, it's the same way we assign a value anywhere else. So maybe we just want that to be sepal length. And we could change all the values like this, but I'm not going to go through all of them. Then all we have to do to update the column names of df-iris is assign temp back into the column names. So colnames of df-iris, now if we pull dfiris, we can see that that first column has been renamed to sepal space length, and we got rid of the cm. So if you want to clean up your column names, you can do that too. That should be everything you need for your assignment this week. Be following along with some examples from the book. Please let me know if you have any questions.